What is a true fact so baffling, it should be false? You can boil water in a paper cup over an open flame. My dad showed me this when I was 4. Blew my mind. I thought witchcraft was outlawed. How? You put water in a cup, put the cup over the flame, and it will boil without the cup burning because the water absorbs all the heat. Shut up. Is this true? Assuming your water isn't too dry, yes. The record for most children born to one mother is 69, to the wife of Fyodor Vasilyev, born 1707, died 1782, a peasant from Shuya, Russia. In 27 labors, she gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets and 4 sets of quadruplets. Edit. Wife name is Valentina Vasilyeva. Not sure what's more impressive, having that many children, or considering it's the 1700s, living through it. Would be interested in how many of the kids survived too. That poor woman. Imagine being pregnant for over 20 years. I imagine after the first decade you just accept your life as a literal baby factory. I mean, she isn't even acknowledged by her own name. Sad face. Exactly what I was thinking, sad face. To the wife of Fyodor Vasilyev, we can't even name her in her own world record? My husband read this for the first time yesterday. His reaction was, dude, get off of her already. It's a uterus, not a clown car. Well, as Groucho Marx said, I also love a cigar, but I take it out of my mouth every once in a while. Edited for terrible spelling of Groucho. Ah, yes, Gaucho, the Argentinian Marx brother. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Wagner Jauregg, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infections killed the syphilis bacteria, then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. Quinine is the reason tonic water glows under black light. Today I learned, tonic water glows under black light. Yeah, why da frack aren't we all serving gin and tonics at Halloween parties? Some of us are. Edit. Wow. This blew up while I toiled at work. So you will like even more that Monster energy drinks glow too. Well, of course the booze witch is serving gin and tonics at the Halloween party. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening even though it's 93 million miles away. Edit. Because space is a vacuum. Sound can't travel though a vacuum. Edit again. Obviously lots of other things in the universe would change, and yes, presumably other stars and planets would make noise too. We'd probably all die screaming as the Earth itself imploded from the pressure of traveling so fast though a universe that wasn't a vacuum. Last edit. Yes, cheese and crackers, Rick and Morty, as hundreds of you have pointed out. That thing makes sound? Yup. The sun is 290 decibels. If space could carry sound, it would still be 125 decibels by the time it got to Earth. It'd be like a jackhammer everywhere all the time. Of course, if that happened, we'd probably evolve to be deaf in that audio spectrum so we wouldn't notice. How often does the sun roar like that? So often you'll barely notice. Well, it ain't much, but it's home. At 1,234.8 kilometers per hour, it would take sound around 13.85 years to reach Earth. Wow, so the sun could die. 8 minutes after we'd be in total darkness, but the roar of the sun would still be everywhere for 13 years. Asterisk edit. Made a post on r writing prompts about this. Had to remove the link. That's a pretty terrifying thought. Thanks for that. Bro, that sounds metal as frack. Imagine just sitting on a world of endless night listening to the roar of a sun long dead. Sounds like a prog rock lyric. From 1613 and 1620 a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive, Virginia had been founded for around a decade, Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope, he was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hasekura Tsunenaga, and was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe until around 1860. Is there a diagram or map or something of how that trip was made? There is. Talk about taking the long way. It's also probably the more straightforward way. 2 sailing trips, with a brief crossing through a single foreign empire in Mexico. By comparison, going the other way probably involved a ship to China, then India, then somewhere in the Middle East before making your way through half a dozen distinct ethnic and cultural regions. Or in other words, going the long way passed through far fewer well-regulated areas. Another fun samurai fact. Oda Nobunaga had a black man as an official samurai. This was in 1581. Where exactly the man was from, Mozambique, is most historians' guess, and what his name was weren't recorded, but the Japanese gave him the nickname Yasuki. He'd come over to Japan on a Portuguese missionary boat. By all accounts, he and Nobunaga got along great, and he fought in several major battles of Japan's warring states period. Sadly, after Nobunaga's death, Akechi Mitsuhide declared Yasuki to be not a man but an animal and had him sent to a nearby Christian church that had been established by missionaries. There is no record of what happened to him after that. Man, Akechi is a freaking grasshole. The longest time between two twins being born is 87 days. I see these threads a bunch, but this answer has me interested. Gonna look up the source on that one. Kilkenny, Ireland, gave birth to twins Amy Ann and Kate Marie Katie. Elliot 87 days apart, making them the twins with the longest interval between their births. The twins were born at Waterford Regional Hospital. Amy was born prematurely on the 1st of June 2012 and Kate followed on the 27th of August. Guinness World Records. Seems like that would be a load of stress for the unborn twin in the womb. As long as they're polyzygote, non-identical, meaning two placentas, two amniotic barriers, etc., then yes, there was probably a crazy amount of jostling, but as long as the water didn't break, the second one is good to simmer indefinitely. Simmer indefinitely. Are you one of those people that think having a baby in the oven is a phrase to be taken literally? Saddam Hussein was an erotic romance novelist in his spare time as the dictator of Iraq. He also had a Quran bound in human flesh, which is apparently a big no-no in Islam, and just about anywhere else. It wasn't a Quran bound in human flesh, it was a Quran written in his own blood. He hired a calligrapher to write it over the span of 2 years using vials of his blood. It was bound in goat leather. Oh good, I thought it was weird for a second there. Is that why his character is such a romantic in the South Park movie? Come on, guy. Cheetahs can't roar, but they can meow like house cats. Whoa, is this legit? Googling now. Edit. This has been the cutest part of my day. Cute, then scary. The way they repeat that sound reminds me of the raptors from Jurassic Park. One day Mao Zedong saw a sparrow eating grain. Thinking that the sparrows were hurting China's grain supply, he and the Communist Party launched the Four Pests campaign. The Chinese military and population killed every sparrow they could find. Embassies didn't allow the Chinese to kill sparrows on their property, so the Chinese banged pots and pans outside the embassies 24/7 until the sparrows died of exhaustion. Unfortunately for the Chinese, sparrows mainly eat insects, not grain. The locust population exploded and 43 million people starved to death. This reminds me of that guy who killed elephants to stop the desertification of the savannah, only to have the desert spread faster. Edit. Put poached instead of killed. My bad. I just heard his TED Talk. He didn't poach elephants, but he did convince the governments to kill them. He now advocates for herds of animals moved randomly around the grasslands to increase their biomass and in turn reverse desertification. He says that the elephant thing is his biggest regret in life and it still haunts him to this day. Haunted by ghost elephants does not sound fun. The hardest part is not talking about them. There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand and the table would miss each other and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I am missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. So if I slap a table 52 novemicillion times, I might phase through it just once? I'll take those odds. Edit. Apparently that would be known as 52 novemicillion? Neat. The Canadian government had a secret homosexual detecting device called the Fruit Machine, which it used to find gay men and purge them from their jobs. The Yakuza regularly strip down to their underpants and blow whistles while riding golden shrines through the streets on the shoulders of dozens of men in loincloths. If your husband fracks another woman, you can sue her for compensation. Wombats poop cubes. What if your husband fracks another man? Assuming he got past the Fruit Machine LMAO. There are more atoms in a single glass of water than there are glasses of water in every ocean on Earth. However, there are more possible versions of a shuffled standard deck of cards than there are atoms on Earth. 1/3 of all biomass on Earth is just ants. It's technically more, near 25% of all terrestrial biomass, my bad. Spearfish, South Dakota, holds the world record for the fastest recorded temperature change. On January 22, 1943, at about 7:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, the temperature in Spearfish was -4 degrees Fahrenheit, -20 degrees Celsius. The Chinook wind picked up speed rapidly, and 2 minutes later, 7:32 a.m., the temperature was +45 degrees Fahrenheit, +7 degrees Celsius above zero. The 49 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius rise in 2 minutes set a world record that still holds. By 9 a.m., the temperature had risen to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. Suddenly, the Chinook died down and the temperature tumbled back to -4 degrees Fahrenheit or -20 degrees Celsius. The 58 degrees Fahrenheit or 32.2 degrees Celsius drop took only 27 minutes. We are all colorblind and lying to each other about it. Because everyone has a different amount of rods and cones in their retina, no person on Earth sees the exact same color. We all just agree on a certain name, which can cause interesting anomalies. For example, some cultures collectively agree that blue and green are the same color. Japan is a good example, or a whole ethnic group will straight up just not have a name for a whole color range. In fact, as humans we seem to be evolving to see more colors. Across the entire world, the first described colors seem to be white and black, followed by red. From there it's yellow and green, then way down the line blue comes along. The entire world didn't even know the color blue existed for a long time. Older stories like Homer's The Odyssey level of old go into incredible detail about clothes, facial features, animals, armor, etc. But the ocean is just described as wine dark, and that's it. Wine is not blue. Betty White is so old that she was on a show about being old for 7 years that was off the air before many of you were even born. She's also older than sliced bread. From the first manned flight to the moon landing was only 66 years. 1903 first flight. 1969 first landing on the moon. Orville Wright died January 30, 1948. He only missed the moon landing by 22 years. That really isn't that long if you think about it. The last guillotine execution in France was in 1977. Donald Trump is the President of the United States. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. I mean, everyone was making a ton of planes. A ton of poor quality planes. Commercial airliners nowadays are pretty sick, and in terms of military planes, the dominant air force in the world is taking a quality over quantity approach despite also having quite a few, but yeah. Edit. What I meant by poor quality was vastly simpler designs that were more conducive to more quantitative production, because World War II in a lot of facets was a numbers game. Like they did the same thing with tanks, it didn't make sense to pour too much money into any given piece of hardware because it was just going to get blown up since the technology didn't exist to prevent that in any way. These days, they can do that with planes at least, because it's kind of hard to hit something that's literally going as fast as a bullet. Gotten a lot of responses about how World War II planes weren't actually poor quality, and I agree, I was just using coarse language. The dominant air force in the world is taking a quality over quantity approach despite also having quite a few, but yeah. The largest air force in the world by number of planes is the US Air Force. The second largest is the US Navy. There is an extremely rare condition called stone man syndrome. It causes any smallest damage done to tissue to regrow into a bone. Speaking briefly, people affected by this sickness slowly turn into living statues as they get older. Wikipedia. Surgical removal of the extra bone growths has been shown to cause the body to repair the affected area with even more bone. I'll never sleep again. Adult patients eventually have to decide on what position they wish to predominantly take for the rest of their lives. This was creepier for me. I'll take the coffin pose, please. And if you could, just go ahead and throw me the frack in it because I'm done. Just make me into a coat rack. I saw a documentary on that once. One advanced sufferer had to explain to a young girl with the syndrome that at some point she was going to have to make a choice, be frozen forever standing up or be frozen forever sitting down, and the pros and cons of both. Utterly chilling. Edit. I have managed to find the documentary and have timestamped it to where her mother, not the kid herself, I misremembered, meets Robert Kinghorn, the man I mentioned. As of 2016 she was still going, aged 17, although the disease had progressed. What's the pro to standing? Sitting you can at least get wheeled around in a wheelchair. Edit. Since this comment broke 1K upvotes, I decided to look into this. I found an article about one man who said he chose the standing position and is happy with that choice. He has a wheelchair he can stand in that also lays him into bed. Standing, you could lie flat in bed too. Sitting, you could have a nice recliner though. Pooping would be easier too. Do you think their buttholes fuse into bone if they take one of those painful large dumps? Why did you have to write this? My neighbor has this condition. She is one of about 800 people to have it. I have watched over the years as she has gotten minor injuries, reduced from walking with a cane to being unable to move out of a special kind of wheelchair. It's a really sad disease, but she remains one of the most positive people I have ever met. Edit. 800. As of 2017, approximately 800 cases of FOP have been confirmed worldwide, making FOP one of the rarest diseases known. I worked with a kid who had that. He was wheelchair-bound, unable to play with his primary school friends, and his jaw was starting to lock up, so feeding was about to become impossible. Absolutely heartbreaking. More people died making the V-2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V-2 rockets. Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. The fuel was made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water, distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time, since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways and getting extremely ill. This simply caused people to start leaving the V-2 program, suggesting that they were only in it for the free alcohol. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual World War II rocket fuel. Was this because of deplorable conditions in slave labor camps or because of manufacturing accidents? This was due to the conditions that the labor force, slave labor, prisoners of the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp had to endure. It is estimated that 20,000 of the 60,000 prisoners who were sent there did not survive. Of those 20,000 deaths, it is believed that around half, 10,000, can be linked to A4 production, more commonly known as the V-2 rocket. Stalin, Hitler, and Freud all lived in Vienna at the same time. Edit. And as others have pointed out, including a source further down, Tito and Trotsky were also there. Imagine a sitcom with them all as roommates. Darn it, Stalin, stop eating my food. It is our food, Freud. I will stop eating it when you stop banging your mother. Will you two Untermenschen kindly shut the frack up? I'm trying to paint. I can't frack this up. This is my last chance to get into the academy. Top 10 anime tragedies. Canned laugh track. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. It's okay, I think I'll survive earning $3,600 an hour. Edit. Thank you, kind stranger, for the silver. Edit 2. Since a lot of you are mentioning taxes and leap years, here's the math for you. A common year would net you $31,536,000, or $31,622,400 during a leap year. With these earnings, your U.S. federal income tax bracket would be 37%, so a common year would give you $19,867,680 and a leap year $19,922,112. Taking taxes and leap years into account, we can determine that it would take you 41,739.2 years to reach Bill Gates' current 2019 net worth of $103.8 billion. Edit 3. A fellow Redditor kindly said that tax brackets in the US don't work at a flat rate, so the math is more complicated than what I, non-American, initially thought. The difference taking into account the actual tax bracket calculations is negligible. As another Redditor pointed out, it's approximately 1%. Yeah, 31.5 mil a year's fine. Giraffes eat bones. Of all the possible giraffe facts to go with, you don't go with the fact that giraffe liver and bone marrow might be a hallucinogen? No, the coolest giraffe fact is that their tongue nerve goes from their brain to their chest and then back up their throat to their tongue. Just like all mammals. Just in a giraffe that means it's going like 20 feet and causes actual tongue lag that they can choke and die from. Cool and proof of evolution. Edit. I've been informed I made a mistake. It's the laryngeal nerve, or voice box. Also, this adaptation can be traced all the way back well beyond just mammals, but to when we were fish, when it would have been a straight shot from brain to larynx, and hadn't gotten kinked by that pesky modern invention, the neck. The coolest giraffe fact for me is that I got to pet one a couple weeks ago. When I was in Africa we were legit surrounded by a family of 12 giraffes. Then one bent over and picked up a gazelle carcass, looked dead into our eyes as it ate its leg. It was so freaking creepy. A500 LB. Cigarette smoking, beer drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during World War II. Private Wojtek helped the Polish win the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino and was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland. Amazing share. I will name my firstborn son Wojtek. Wojtek is a totally normal Polish name, so Polish people will just assume he's Polish. And beer-drinking brown bears will assume he's a bear. We live many times closer to the last dinosaur than the first and last dinosaur did to each other. And Cleopatra lived closer to the first man on the moon than to the time the pyramids were built. That's a trip. And there were still living woolly mammoths when the pyramids were being built. The life of Frane Selleck, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962. Frane is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963. On his first plane trip he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack, unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. 1966. He was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. 1970. His car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. 1973. In yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. 1995. He was hit by a bus but only sustained minor injuries. 1996. To escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Edit. Got his name wrong. Edit 2. Got the first edit wrong. Turns out I was right the first time. He also won the lottery, I think. Yup. In 2003, he won $1.1 million in US dollars. In 2010, he gave the rest of his money to friends and family as he wanted to live a more frugal life. Casually forgetting to mention you won the lottery because your life is so eventful. I feel the odds of falling from a plane in a haystack are way lower than winning the lottery though. It was the first time he played the lottery too. His car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents. I don't know why, but this made me laugh so darn hard. That's completely insane. Muttering, here we freaking go again with this. If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock paper scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, losers were knocked out and winners stayed on, etc. You would only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.53 billion people on the planet. This would be an awesome fight-style anime like the final rounds are super intense and for 20 minutes the main character is strategizing his next move based on the entire life of his opponent. As a child he was abused by his parents and he copes by pretending to be strong, like the Mai rock. You threw scissors. Impossible. Fool. I am the perfect life form. Even the sun bows to my might. I have no choice, I must use all of my strength. Rock. Paper. Scissors. Dynamite overdrive. When Mount Everest was first measured it was exactly 29,000 feet. It was reported as 29,002 because exactly 29,000 was not believable. I'm picturing someone standing at the bottom with a tape measure and someone running all the way up with the other end. Imagine the one climbing Everest accident let go like right before they got to the summit? Whoever decided that was the first man to put 2 feet on Everest. To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electron is 16 times longer than the distance between the Sun and Pluto. There's a universe inside us. There are many universes inside us. When a woman with breast implants is cremated, the implants will melt into goo. It drips to the bottom of the furnace and needs to be cleaned up once cooled. Kim Kardashian gonna just straight up melt into a puddle. Edit. Wow, thanks for the silvers and golds. She's had so much plastic surgery they're gonna have to recycle her. Her latest tattoo is a 2 inside a triangle. Edit. Silver and gold? You folks are awesome. Thanks anonymous Redditors. The tattoo bit is pretty good. This almost sounds like a medieval method of testing for witchcraft. I'm picturing a man sifting frantically through ashes. They were real. There is no universally accepted definition of vegetable. It's a cultural and culinary term, and varies from place to place. If my son hates it, it's a vegetable. Problem solved. What if your son hates himself? Beat him. Hard. He'll be a vegetable eventually. Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years. And, for fun, one of my favorites. Woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built. Harvard didn't teach classes in calculus when it was founded because it wasn't discovered yet. Massachusetts Hall at Harvard is 56 years older than the United States. For some reason, woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built doesn't surprise me nearly as much as Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater told his story on national television. Edit. Based on suggestions below, I'm proposing a new version of this factoid which makes it sound even crazier, but still factually true. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater appeared as a contestant on a nationally televised game show with Lucille Ball. Link. Sauce fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who in his carry-on accidentally packed a loaded handgun, made it on the plane, and was so freaked out when he landed, he upseat it back home and took a Greyhound bus after his trip. A total friend of mine did the same with a folding knife. Work had sent him up to PA for business about 6 years ago. We paid for the trip back because expenses and asked what happened. He originally told us the stress of flying had done enough to him. About a month later he told us, I know as someone that flew internationally with a handgun in his check luggage, on accident but still. He left out of Florida heading for South Korea with a layover in Japan. The Japanese found it and he was arrested and spent over 2 weeks in jail. They let him go. What's with people accidentally packing guns in their luggage? I've never accidentally packed anything, let alone a weapon. Nintendo was founded in 1889. Before video games, Nintendo ran sex hotels in Japan. So they went from encouraging sex to keeping it away. Didn't they start off as cards? Yes, Hanafuda. According to Wikipedia, they still make them in Japan. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the Sun. The reason for this is that to fly directly into the Sun you need to first launch from Earth, and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the Sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the Sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required for that to do it directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the Sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than getting basically anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the Sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but plans to make the closest passes than any probe ever has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the Sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post they are 1 week shy of a year in. Tell that to all the Kerbins I've melted in Kerbal Space Program. President John Tyler, born in 1790, has 2 living grandsons. A similar one I like is that there is a living person who is the daughter of a U.S. Civil War veteran, at least as of 2017. And she gets to draw a Civil War veteran's pension. Rabbit Bunny. $73.13 a month according to one article in 2014. They should at least give her a lifetime supply of hardtack. The great thing about hardtack is that when you fill the barrel with water all the weevils float to the top. It's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and lot of courage. If a hydrogen atom was the size of a huge ball, how large would an electron be? We don't have a clear idea of the size of an electron. We've only been able to establish bounds on its maximum possible size, thus it is either that size or smaller. Some suspect it's literally a point in space containing no length, width, or height, but as it has mass, this would make an electron also a black hole. I wasn't expecting to learn this much about electrons while reading this thread, but I am happy I did. Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein thrice in the last 50 years. On the first time in 1976, Swiss military got lost and ended up in Liechtenstein, so the Liechtensteiners offered them drinks like proper hosts. On the second time in 1992, Swiss military forgot that a certain observation post was actually not in Swiss territory but in Liechtenstein territory, so they just said sorry and forgot about it. Then again in 2007, the Swiss army got lost and entered Liechtenstein, but eventually realized they weren't in Switzerland anymore, Toto, so they turned back. Liechtenstein didn't even know this happened till the Swiss apologized, again, to which they basically said, no problem, bro. Takeaways. The Swiss army are bad with directions. The Liechtenstein army people are chill bros. According to Wikipedia, Liechtenstein doesn't have a military. It has a police force that consists of 87 field officers and 38 civilian staff, totaling 125 employees. Been there and it seems like they have more banks than people. Horses can't vomit. Rats are also unable to vomit. This incidentally is why rat poison works. They have no way to rid their bodies of it before enough builds up to kill them. I now have a mental image of a bulimic horse in tears. Neither can giraffes, nor guinea pigs. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake, no food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2495396. Edit. Fixed autocorrect. Keep in mind for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others attempted this after him and wound up dead. Do not try this at home. It requires very strict supervision. From what I remember, a lot of deaths are from when they start eating again. You have to start back extremely slowly. Wait. I remember this came up recently in another thread. It's called refeeding syndrome. If Earth was a basketball, to scale the moon would be a tennis ball. It would orbit around 7.5 meters away, which is a lot farther than most people think. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was a tennis ball, to scale the electron would orbit at about 2,500 meters away. There is no ball small enough to compare to how small electrons would still be at this scale. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom were the size of a proton, the electron would be the size of an electron. Mind equals blown. A million seconds ago was week before last, July 24th. A billion seconds ago was 1987. Edit. Made some rounding errors. We're looking at November, 1987. Never thought of large numbers like this before, kinda puts some people's wealth into perspective. Right? Like no one works hard enough to earn $1 billion. People tend to equate million and billion, mostly because they sound similar and are both big numbers. But a billion is so much more than a million. A million inches is almost 16 miles, but a billion inches is almost 16,000 miles. So if you travel a million inches, you're in the next county. But if you travel a billion inches, you're a quarter of the way around the world. There is no good metric for the number of languages on Earth. This is mostly because linguists cannot agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric of how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. Fun little anecdote about the Bible translations into obscure languages. A missionary from our church works for a mission that translates the Bible into languages heretofore untranslated and adapts the books and chapters into an audiobook app. He was in a taxi in Kenya and asked the driver what his language was. The driver told him in English that he spoke Swahili. The missionary pressed him and asked if he spoke a local tribal language. The driver said he did and referenced an obscure language he was sure the missionary wouldn't know. The missionary pulled up that language on the app and started playing the audiobook from some passage in the Bible, whereupon the astonished driver proclaimed, "That's my home tribe's language, and that's my cousin's voice." Just a funny little story that your comment reminded me of. I am not Christian, nor do I speak Swahili, but I can sing the Lord's Prayer in Swahili. Thanks Civ 4. That Bible metric is really pretty clever. It's always going to underestimate by a bit, but it'll give you a good idea. The Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than it did the Stegosaurus. Yeah, 'cause it was afraid of those spikes. The Thagomizer. Even if 99% of Earth's population thought you were unattractive, 76 million people would still find you attractive. Too bad those 76 million people never see me. Edit. Didn't expect so many upvotes. Thank you. You find 99% of them unattractive. For the remainder, either you or them are too nervous to approach or talk to each other. So you're telling me there's a chance? Edit. Wow, thank you for the medal, kind stranger. My first ever platinum. But will this improve my chances? There are more trees on the Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you've probably made an entirely unique order, as compared to every other shuffle in history. I love the cards one. When I tell it to people, I usually go with, there are more unique possibilities for card order than there are atoms in the solar system. A lot more. Then when they call BS, I tell them to Google estimated atoms in the solar system 10 to the power of 57 and compare it to 52 factorial on their calculator 8 to the power of 67. Edit. Yeah, I used a caret when I meant to use E. Please, I just need about 10 to 15 more people to write the same comment and I think I'll finally learn my lesson. Someone once wrote down a great visualization for how big that number is. Imagine you have a timer for 52 factorial seconds. Get to the equator. Every billion years, take one step forward on the equator. Every time you get all around the equator, take one drop of water out of the Pacific Ocean. Continue this until the Pacific Ocean is empty, then put one piece of paper on the ground. Fill the Pacific Ocean back up and do the whole thing all over again. When the stack of paper reaches from the Earth to the Sun, the first 3 digits of the timer won't have changed yet. You can fit every planet between the Earth and Moon, including all the gas giants. But if you lined up all of Jeff Bezos's money from end to end, it wouldn't fit between the Earth and Moon. It could go to the Moon and back 34 times. Jeff Bezos has enough money to make a ladder to the Moon. And to make it out of money. In dollar bills or pennies? Dollar bills. Jeff Bezos's pennies could go to the Moon and back roughly 207 times. End to end or stacked? End to end. Edit. A stack of 100 pennies is just shy of the length of a dollar, so if you stack the pennies to the Moon, they wouldn't quite make it there and back as many times. GPS satellites have to compensate for time dilation, because time runs at a different rate in orbit. Equally as mind-bending is that GPS works by comparing the time stamps from different satellites. That is next step black magic fakery. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. That's what caused the famine. The Brits exported all the food and the Irish were left with only one small kind of potato for themselves, which then was afflicted with disease. I think we can agree it should be false, and if not for the outright disdain for human life on the part of the British authorities, would have been. Only 4 people have been to the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the ocean. One of those people is James Cameron, the director of Titanic. Didn't he make the movie Titanic as an excuse to visit the actual wreck? Yes. Visiting Challenger Deep is why we haven't had most of those Avatar movies they've been talking about. In 50 years, he'll be remembered for his tech and innovation rather than his films. Edit. For everyone whining about Avatar. The man went to the deepest part of the ocean because he wanted to and could afford to. That's a lot more memorable than any movie he'll ever make. In chess, there are over 9 million variations after just 3 moves each. 288 billion different possible positions after 4 moves each. In a complete game, there are more possible positions than there are electrons in the observable universe. Yet it's still the Sicilian every game. The color orange is named after the fruit. Before, the color orange was called red. This is why people with orange hair are called redheads. If you shrink down our sun to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be equal to the size of the continental United States. Space is huge, and because we're out in a spiral arm, we'd probably be somewhere in space Florida. Something poetic about that. Earth is the galaxy's Florida? Nothing has made more sense. Sense of smell is molecular, meaning that molecules of what you are smelling are actually inside of your body as a result of smelling them. Think about that the next time you enter a public restroom. Like farts, little bits of poop in your head. What you are smelling when you smell poop are the gases given off by the bacteria in the poop. I'm sure there's plenty of feasible situation where actual pieces of poop get into your nose, but in general that's not what's happening. You see your nose all the time, but your brain just ignoring it. Well, not anymore, thanks. My nose is actually annoying me now. Mike the headless chicken lived without a head for 18 months. I live in the town next to where this took place. They now have a festival every year remembering Mike. My friends and I were pretty obsessed with Mike in 9th grade. The website used to have a really catchy theme song and now it's stuck in my head again. The Planck scale is the smallest known unit of measurement. If you were to expand a single atom until it was the size of the observable universe, about 92 billion light-years in diameter, a single Planck unit at this scale would be about the size of an average tree. They aren't all small. Planck units are formed by setting a bunch of universal constants to 1 and seeing what falls out. And some of them are large. You are closer to being a millionaire than Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. Well, between Jeff Bezos and I, we have an average net worth of 60 billion. There is a theoretical possibility that a child can be born that has 2 biological fathers and 1 biological mother, inherits DNA information from 2 different men and 1 woman. Search for heteropaternal superfecundation and chimerism for those who are interested. Edit. I'm talking about a form of chimerism which would result from heteropaternal superfecundation, where 2 eggs fertilized by different men merge and result in a single child. Edit 2. Tried to make the most less misleading, sorry for any confusion smiley face. It's heteropaternal superfecundation, even though the sound of it is a fetal aberration. 1 lone egg and loads of sperm yield a complex incubation, heteropaternal superfecundation. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1819. This means that he went his early childhood without going through his dinosaur phase. Sad face. Sharks evolved before trees did. Trees evolved before the bugs responsible for rotting, i.e. bacteria which could eat lignin and cellulose, did. Thus when they died, they just fell over in place and lay there instead of rotting. Over time the weight of the upper layers of tree corpses compacted the lower levels, which eventually became the coal we dig up and use today. The coolest thing about this is that since there were so many trees just blanketing the continents of the earth, and that they were basically sitting on top of coal, that whenever something, say, a lightning strike, hit a dead pile of wood, it could spark a forest fire that would rage across large swaths of whole continents, and they would last for years. Think about how freaking insane that would look from space, or the top of a mountain. Just nothing but fire for as far as you can see in all directions. There was this French guy named Terrare in the late 1700s that could eat anything, in any amount. He was able to eat a quarter of a cow on one day and ate dinner for 15 for one meal when he was being tested. He was even able to swallow an entire eel, with bones included, without hesitating. When he went to the military service, they used him as message transport, but after being captured he went back and tried to find a cure. In the hospital where he was staying, he was suspected of eating a baby, so they kicked him out. He was average weight, and when he died a few years later they could see inside his stomach just by opening his mouth. Terry's a video which explains it on better detail. Terrare, look at me. Did you eat a freaking baby? This was almost definitely an alien pretending to be a dude. They suspected him of eating a baby. He was caught multiple times eating corpses in the morgue. IIRC. Taser is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle. TASER. So his name was Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle face? Now it makes sense. The speed of light is always the same, regardless of the relevant speed of the observer. Say you're standing still, and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour, it passes you at 60 miles per hour, right? Say you're driving at 30 miles per hour and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour, because you're already moving at 30, the car only moves away from you at 30 miles per hour. Light doesn't work this way. If you're standing still and turn on a flashlight, the beam of light moves away from you at light speed. But if you're moving at half the speed of light and turn on a flashlight, the beam still moves away from you at light speed, even though it's only moving at the standard speed of light. So even people who aren't moving half the speed of light see it moving at the same speed as you do, which isn't possible, but is somehow true. It makes no sense and makes me think there is a lot to physics we still have to learn, and I bet we find out a lot of the things we know are wrong. If you are traveling at 99.999999999% the speed of light, light appears to move away from you at light speed. From the perspective of light, it leaves its source and arrives at its destination at the same time, regardless of how far apart those two locations are. So basically, you would be unable to travel alongside a beam of light, no matter how fast you are going. That's really cool, but it's hard to really understand. That's exactly correct. The behavior of light is extremely unintuitive. Let's say that you and a beam of light are moving across my field of view. You are traveling at 99% the speed of light. From my perspective, you are traveling almost as fast as the beam of light. From your perspective, the same beam of light is moving away from you at light speed. It's as if you were standing still. In fact, you are standing still. From your frame of reference, I'm the one moving 99% the speed of light. Edit. And if we're both moving at 99% of the speed of light in opposite directions relative to a third observer, we would appear to be moving 99.99% the speed of light relative to each other, assuming I correctly understand the math. A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel. I heard that if you had a piece of silk 10 wide, 1 foot deep, and 1 foot long, you could stop a 747 at full speed. Edit. Those measurements are in feet. For the rest of the world it would be approximately 3.3 meters wide, 0.3 meters deep, and 0.3 meters long. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. To give birth, that qualification implies something so much worse. She's still alive and resides in Lima, Peru apparently. Lena Medina had a rare condition whereby her body went through puberty very early, making it possible for her to conceive a child. Her son was born via caesarean section when she was 5 years and 7 months old, and was raised as her younger brother. The father was never fully confirmed, though suspicion fell on male family members. The girl herself obviously had no clear recollection. In the last 3,000 years, there were only 268 years in which there was no war in the world. Which was the last year without a war? 758 BC, the original summer of love. The phrase plastic surgery has nothing to do with the material. Plastic surgery as a field predates the development of plastics by 70 years. The two terms simply share a Greek word root meaning sculpted or reshaped. We live closer to the lifetime of Cleopatra than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. This is closer to false every time I hear it. Yeah, that's because of the passage of time. It'll be a few centuries before it's false though. In Florida it is illegal to tie an elephant to a parking meter without first paying the meter as if the elephant were a car. Where in Florida do you find live elephants? Please don't say Disney World and Dumbo. Oklahoma has a law on its books that makes whaling illegal, in addition to US and IWC bans. For all that coastline in Oklahoma. In case the whole western US falls into the ocean, they already have a whaling ban. In 1000 BC, a war was cancelled due to rain. Edit. Woo first silver. Thank you stranger. I'll one-up you. Around the 500s BC, the Medes, modern-day Iran, fought the Lydians, modern-day Turkey, in a war. During the war, there was a mother-freaking solar eclipse and everything went black. Both sides freaked out and came to a peace agreement. Both sides stopped fighting each other during the eclipse as they thought it was the gods telling them something. This has been known as the Battle of the Eclipse for centuries, but no one really believed there was an eclipse. Then, scientists recently were able to backtrack and find out when every single solar eclipse happened, and lo and behold it happened right around the date of the battle. So now it is viewed as a historical fact. Edit. Extra fun fact. According to Herodotus's history, a Greek mathematician successfully and accurately predicted the eclipse on the day of the battle. This means that in 583 BC ancient scholars could successfully predict the sun's rotation to a T. 1,200 years later people still thought the world was flat somehow lol. Sucks the Roman Empire had to fall. Thank you so much for one-upping me. This story is amazing. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Radithor that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Nuka-Cola. Didn't they take that off the market after some guy drank so many of them so quick that his lower jaw fell off? OMG, he did. Apparently he even developed holes in his skull. That's horrifying, poor dude. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. I just read a post on technically the truth. We've all kicked a pregnant woman before. Some of us today even. 17-inch pizza is bigger than two 12-inch pizzas. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of and north of Iceland. 1 billion second is about 31 years. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food they can get brain damage. Your head ages faster than your feet. Not if you live in Australia. Polar bears are left-handed. All of them. Edit. Whoops, turns out this isn't true. I'm a fraud and a hack. Even the bipolar bears? Yeah. Being bisexual or bipolar doesn't change handedness. That's ambidextrous. Technically being bisexual is being ambisextrous. If you could fold a piece of printer paper in half 103 times it would be the width of the observable universe. Is there enough mass in a piece of paper to stretch that far? Sharks have been around longer than trees. Also, trees were around for millions of years before there were any bacteria that could digest them. So dead trees just piled up for millions of years. Trees also predated grass by millions of years, which just seems weird to me. Millions of trees are planted each year because squirrels forget where they hide their nuts. This is not a bug, it's a feature. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they are relaxed and at ease. Whales used to have legs. Whales still have legs, they're just fully merged inside the body. If you took every civilian-owned firearm in the US and laid them side by side, you would have a giant belt of guns long enough to go completely around the moon. After going completely around the moon, you would still have enough guns left over to equip every soldier in the world with 2 guns. At first I thought you were gonna say, if you took every civilian-owned firearm in the US and laid them side by side, you would have a lot of guns. And they're going to need them now you've gone and armed the motherfreaking moon. The smell of freshly cut grass is actually a distress signal. It's the smell of the grass releasing chemicals to save itself from injury. That's dark. Every 2 minutes, we take as many photos as all of humanity took during the 1800s. Most early human inventions like stone tools, fire, and clothing weren't invented by humans at all. They were taught to humans by our hominid ancestors. Our alien ancestors. Fixed that for you. When a guy comes his semen travels at 28 miles per hour. Which makes it illegal in a school zone for 2 reasons now. Yes, that is the primary reason. Everything in the universe is either a potato or not a potato. Light behaves differently when observed or not. The results from my favorite experiment, the quantum eraser, are actually fracked. One of the tracks in Doom 2016 features an actual chainsaw used as an instrument. It's Doom, so I wouldn't consider that baffling. More like expected. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you would actually see the back of your own head. Finally, I could shave my own neck. David, the statue by Michelangelo, was made from very mediocre marble that literally nobody wanted to sculpt, but it was too expensive to throw away. Not quite. It was made from marble that a previous sculptor, Duccio, had started carving for a statue of David for a city hall. He abandoned the commission for some reason, but he didn't own the block, so he left that. Another sculptor had a whack at it some time later and probably screwed it up. He was kicked off the project but also didn't own the block, which sat around for a few decades, getting rained on. Michelangelo saw the block, it was known as the Duccio block, and decided he had to have it. The work the second sculptor did is probably why the David has such an odd stance. As for the marble itself, it's Carrara marble, which is a really top-notch sculptural marble for Italian Renaissance sculptors. But it was quarried about 50 years before Michelangelo got it, and I don't know how it would stand up to weather, so there may have been some degradation. It's a fine piece of marble though. The TNT Minecraft parody song has more views in YouTube than the original song Dynamite. Anne Frank, Martin Luther King Jr., and Barbara Walters were all born in the same year. Water is the only substance that expands and becomes less dense as it cools. If it didn't, ice would sink to the bottom of the ocean and eventually freeze the entire planet except a thin skim of water on the surface as the sun shone down on it. Basically, life would never occur. Not entirely accurate. Bismuth and antimony are both less dense in their solid state, along with several alloys. But, yes, it is extremely rare. If traveling from Detroit to Canada, you head south. Born and raised in South Detroit has a better ring to it than Windsor. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career and he would still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus Gretzky fact: he and his brother own the record for being the highest scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. El Paso is closer to San Diego than it is to Houston. And I-10 will be under construction in perpetuity. There is a jellyfish that lives forever. Asterisk can live forever under certain circumstances. Your chances of winning the lottery are the same as your chances of correctly predicting the second an animal chosen at random will sneeze within a 9-year period. That is oddly specific. I spend a lot of time on the history videos that put things into scale a bit more. Also kinda morbid, but Ringo Starr almost didn't get a gig with the Beatles because they thought he was too old for their band. Take in mind who's still alive and making music. I am aware their deaths weren't natural causes, but I find that funny. The brain named itself. There is a non-zero possibility that you could molecularly decompose or fall apart. Your atoms could all suddenly combust. Your atoms could align perfectly with a chair so that you could fall through it. It is so unfathomable how unlikely it is, but it is still possible. Also, look up Joe Rogan explaining infinity. Might keep you up at night. Well, I guess that should make video game developers feel a little better about clipping then. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe.